Welcome to Work Your Magic with me, your host, Ada. This is a podcast at the intersection of business and spirituality for the soul-led entrepreneur who wants to succeed in alignment and authentically shine. Each week, we will dive deep into all things business while discussing the unconventional path of following your intuition and letting your soul lead the way as you build your legacy. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Work Your Magic podcast, episode 4. In this episode, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper and continue the conversation that we had about my spiritual journey, but actually give you a little bit more context in regards to my past, because I actually grew up in church, which is a really interesting fun fact. And I think people are always a little bit shocked because they're like, wait a minute. So like you grew up religious and like, where was the shift? Like, how did you become more spiritual? And what is the actual difference between like religion and spirituality? So in this episode, that is exactly what we are going to be discussing. What is the difference between spirituality and religion? Isn't it all the same thing? What's the big deal? What's the difference? Why are people always going back and forth? I don't understand. Let me break it down for you. So religion is a specific set of organized beliefs and practices shared by a community or group. Spirituality is more of an individual practice and inward journey that honors the divinity within. The interesting thing is that I have actually been able to experience both. And I'm so grateful for the awareness that I have. And I'm very grateful for the way that my mom instilled in me having an open mind. So let me tell you about my childhood, y'all. My mom is Dominican. She's from a small beach town in the northeast coast of Dominican Republic called Nagua. And she immigrated to the United States when she was in her 20s. So I think coming to America and being exposed to so much was probably really exciting for her. She's a Sagittarius, by the way. And I guess she was just open to like, sure. Let me try this. Let me try that. I remember going to a park in New York when we were still living there, and the Mormons came up to us. I remember they were wearing like their little white shirt with the black pants and the black backpack. And they started talking to my mom, and they're like giving her these pamphlets, and they invited us to their church. And y'all, we went to the Mormon church. So I have that memory. Then I have memories of going to like Catholic mass. It wasn't always like every Sunday. Like she wasn't like an avid church goer, but we would go to like mass and stuff like that. Then when we moved down to Florida, I remember the Jehovah's Witnesses knocking on our door, and homegirl sure did open and let them in. And they sure did come sit in our living room with their little atalayas. I don't know how to say that in English. It's like the little books that they have. And you know, they invited us to their church. They were Latino, so they invited us to their church for whatever reason. My mom felt like safe. She trusted them. And I remember she didn't even have a car because she didn't know how to drive. So they would come pick us up and take us to church. And the gag is that, you know, for a while, like we were all going to church as a family. And then I guess she was like, you know what? Like, I'm good with going to church. I really want my kids to like grasp the information so that they can grow up to, I guess, be like outstanding human beings. I don't know. So she stopped going to church, but she would still send us to church. And I know too, she worked a lot. So she would typically like sleep in on Sundays and rest. So that also had to do with it. But I remember the like church members. I remember their names to this day too. It was Isidro. And oh my God, what was the wife's name? Oh, I literally just forgot the wife's Joanny. I think that was her name. I don't remember now. But they would come pick us up and take us to church. and the car that they had at the time like only fit like 2 people. So me and my siblings would literally fight about who was going to church that weekend, because we knew that they were coming to pick us up, and we would rock, paper, scissors. We would just get into the biggest fights about, no, I went last week, it's your turn. No, it's your turn. It was like, it just was not fun at all. Cause when you're a kid, it's like, I'm trying to watch cartoons and eat cereal. Like, I don't want to go to church. And it's when you're forced to do something that you don't want to do, especially as a kid, it just becomes irritating. So like, there is a part of me that I guess when it comes to like the Jehovah's Witness church, like, is a little bit just like irritated, because I think I just have those memories of like, I just want to be a kid and being forced to go to church. No shade to the Jehovah's Witness people. No shade to nobody. No shade to no religions, by the way. I'm just sharing my personal experience. So we stopped going to the Jehovah's Witness church. And then my mom, I guess, felt the itch to like find another church or like try something else. So we started going to Christian churches, and we ended up at a Methodist church that had a large Latino congregation, and most of the community was Dominican. So I guess my mom felt like really at home there, and we started going to that church. And that church was actually really fun. I loved going to like the Sunday school, and I loved meeting all the other kids, and I just felt very seen there, because moving to Florida, most of the schools that I went to were predominantly white. So to be able to go to church and be like around your people, even though it wasn't a church setting, like just felt, I remember just feeling like at home. And a lot of the people that attended to were like people that had moved from New York, or like people that had just came from DR. So I just felt very at home in that church. So that became sort of like our home church, and where we started to attend frequently. And my mom like became a member, and we would attend, you know, just every Sunday, even multiple days a week. They would be church on Wednesdays, Fridays, and Sundays, and we would go 3 times a week. If not, we would at least be there every Sunday. And so that was the church that I grew up in. I think we started going to church there maybe when I was like 9 or something, and I grew up there all the way up until when I left for college. Like I was still going to that church. And, the church expanded. It kind of became like a small mega church, because they were able to raise money to buy land and to like build out the church from scratch. And it was like really cool to be part of that process and see how the whole thing came about. And I remember like the newer church was like super cool, because it had like a tech department. I mean, I think my love for live music, I can credit to like this church, because I remember our Sunday services used to be lit. Like we had a full band. Like we had a violinist, a guitar player, the drummer, the choir singers, a saxophone player. It was just like a whole production every Sunday service. There was a whole tech department. There was like walkie-talkies that you would put on, and that would translate the service for you if you tuned into a certain station. I mean, this church was very like, I would assume like what TD Jake's church is like if you were to go. Like it was like a small mega church, and had a really big congregation. And y'all, I was part of Christmas plays. I used to go to church camp. I was a Sunday school teacher at this church. I used to teach the toddlers 2 to 3 years old. We used to watch lots of VeggieTales. I love VeggieTales to this day. And I also used to teach, I can't remember the age group, but I want to say maybe like 8 to 10 or something like that age range. And yeah, I was like, when I tell you, I was a church girl. I really was. And, I formed a lot of great relationships with the other youth at that church. Like I said, I would go to church camp, all of the things. And I was saved at 13 years old. So at 13 is when I really became like conscious and aware of like Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And I really felt like the energy, the connection, and, I accepted Christ into my heart, and I have a very vivid memory of that. I think my favorite part about growing up in the church was really being able to feel the beautiful energy of people coming together with the same intention, and that is to praise God. And till this day, whenever I find myself like wanting to be around that energy, because if you've never been to church before, when you go to a Sunday service and you experience all of these people coming together with the same intention and pouring that same love and energy out to honor God, it is really the most beautiful thing. Like, the energy in the room is palpable and it is just beautiful. When I was living in New York, I would find myself at times like taking the train to go down to Times Square to go to the Hillsong Church and attend their Sunday services, just because I felt like I miss that feeling. Like, I want to be in that presence, in that energy. So again, I just really was able to create a connection with spirit at an early age, and to be able to really understand and believe in a higher power, in a higher source outside of me. So I would say that my time in church and my connection to spirit, that relationship was really acknowledging that there's a higher power, there's a greater source, it exists outside of me, and really connecting with God, connecting with Jesus, honoring that source. My favorite Bible verse till this day is Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5-6, which is, honor the Lord with all of your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. I almost forgot it, y'all. It's been a minute. In all your ways, acknowledge him and he will direct your paths. That is my favorite Bible verse. It has always stayed with me. I had to memorize it for church, and it is just my favorite Bible verse. It's my North Star. It is just the truth. Honor the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. Okay? All your ways, acknowledge him. Acknowledge spirit, acknowledge source, and he will direct your path. Source will direct your paths. Bing, boom. Okay? By the way, if you're not Dominican, bing, boom is like period, I guess. That's the best translation that I can give you. Are you a soul-led entrepreneur thriving with ease, or simply questioning if entrepreneurship was the right choice for you as you struggle doing all the things just to survive day to day in your life and business? Do you want a new way to operate your business and increase yearly profits that actually works? If you're truly ready for real business mastery with ease and an increase in profit, Business Through the Chakras was designed specially to help you get there. Through my signature group coaching program, Business Through the Chakras, I've had the pleasure of helping soul-led entrepreneurs heal their energy blocks, shine authentically as the badass CEOs they've always wanted to become, and master their business strategies. All of this resulted in them tripling their income. You see, my approach is different from other business courses because I intentionally and consciously use the chakras to understand energy blocks and the ways your business is mirroring to you the things you need to heal to become the successful soulpreneur you've always wanted to be. If you're interested in signing up for the next cohort, make sure that you get on the Business to the Chakras waitlist by visiting allthingsada.com. Once again, that is allthingsada.com, and you can find more information about this program in the show notes. But anyways, that was my experience growing up in church. And so when I moved away from Tampa and I went to school in Miami, and then I eventually landed back in New York City, I was not going to church. I did not have like a home church that I would go to. And even though like I wasn't going to church or anything, my connection with God was still there. Like every single morning, the first thing that I do is say a prayer of gratitude. Like I thank God for waking me up. There's a lot of people that did not wake up this morning. I happen to be someone who did wake up. So always say a prayer of gratitude in the morning. So I was just always still like maintaining that connection, always believing in a higher source, always believing in something greater than me, always believing that, God was guiding my paths and really protecting me and taking care of me. And it's really interesting because a lot of people that don't know my background and don't know that I grew up in church, when they see like how deep I am into spirituality and my spiritual journey, they always like, I remember somebody asked me on an Instagram live, they were like, do you believe in God? And I was like, girl, do I believe in God? Like, my life is a miracle. My entire life is a miracle. Like, I was never supposed to make it this far. So when you have that understanding, it's like, how could I not believe in God? How could I not believe in God when my entire life is a miracle? And yeah, it's always interesting to see how people react when I like share more of my background and actually share that I grew up in church. So anyways, from the time that I left my mom's house to the time that I moved to New York, I wasn't really connecting with anything, but I was still praying to God and just always believing in something bigger than me and outside of me. And it wasn't until Art passed away in 2012, which I shared that story in the last podcast episode, all about my spiritual journey. That's when my whole world got shaken upside down. And I was questioning God a lot. Like, why did this happen? Why? I remember I was angry at God for a minute when that happened. I went through all of the stages of grief, and in the anger part, I was angry at Art, but I was also angry at God because I didn't understand why this was happening. And, that was really the beginning of my spiritual journey. So losing Art was the beginning of my spiritual awakening, and processing all of that was part of my spiritual journey, processing his death. And what I've learned these last 10 years, and why I say that I'm more spiritual than I am religious, is I learned that God does not live outside of me. God is within me. And so because I am a child of God, because I'm made in his image, he does not live outside of me. He's within me. So the more that I go inward, the more that I honor the divinity within myself, the more that I'm connecting to God. And I think for me, that's the biggest difference. Like, religion is a specific set of organized beliefs and practices shared by a community. So when I grew up in that church, it was a Methodist Christian church. So obviously we would read the Bible. We are following those set of organized beliefs, and you're taught that like God is outside of you. And my spiritual journey, my spiritual awakening really taught me that God is within me. And for the last 10 years, my focus has just been on going deeper within myself. And the deeper that I go within myself, the deeper that I'm able to experience God in my life. And the biggest tip that I can give for anyone that is going through their spiritual awakening, on their spiritual journey, curious about spirituality, is to stay curious. Follow the breadcrumbs that your curiosity leaves behind. If you feel called to read this book, if you feel called to research this, if you feel called to learn more about that, do it. Follow the breadcrumbs. That is your intuition leading you and guiding you. And ultimately, your intuition is like the greatest gift that God could give you. It's your internal compass. It's your internal GPS. And the more that you're able to quiet the noise outside of you and dial the noise down, but dial your intuition up and your awareness up, the more that you're connected to God, the more that you're connected to source. And your intuition is the path. Your intuition is the way. Whatever you feel called to learn more about, follow that. I'm very grateful that I'm naturally a curious person and that I love to learn. And honestly, in my opinion, I think that we spend a lot of time learning about religions that are connected to cultures that we do not come from. I have done a lot of deep diving over the last few years into African religions and African spirituality, that is where my ancestors come from. And clearly I'm very familiar with, the European ancestors and of mine that I have and their religions, right? The Christianity, the Catholicism. Is Catholicism? I don't know. You know what I mean. But I didn't know much about my African ancestors and what their religions were. Or actually I did, but it was, disguised as Catholicism. And we'll get into that into another podcast episode. But really being more intentional about learning and getting more information on the religions that our ancestors practice has been really beautiful. And, I went to Ghana a few years ago. That was life-changing. I could talk about that in another podcast episode if you guys desire, but I really want to challenge us to what would it look like for us to dig a little deeper and to learn about religions and spiritual practices that are actually connected to our culture and where our ancestors come from. You might learn a thing or two. And so my biggest thing is just to follow your curiosity. As someone who grew up in church, as someone who loves God, who loves Jesus, and I appreciate Jesus so much, and I think he is incredible. Jesus consciousness is amazing. I might have to do a podcast episode on that as well. Guys, there's just so much I want to talk about. But like I was saying, as someone who grew up religious and now has really gone deeper and more inward within herself and considers herself more spiritual, I would have to say that in my opinion, and from my personal experience, I feel like religion is very limiting to the experience that you can have with the higher source. My spiritual journey really has taught me how expansive, how deep and layered our journeys can be. And it's just so fascinating and so dope. I think religion is amazing for those of us who need a structured and organized way to connect with source. And at the end of the day, if honoring your religion and beliefs, whatever they are, helps you grow and ascend to the highest version of who you are meant to be, then I love that for you. I truly do. And I will always honor and respect the path that you chose to become your highest self and get there. I hope this episode was insightful and gave you a little bit more context and background as to who I am and how my mom exposing me to so many different religions at such an early age really shaped my outlook on the world, and how I really truly honor the way that people choose to connect to source, whether it's through religion or through spirituality. Yo, shout out to my mom for just being so open-minded and being able to pass down to me. I'm truly so grateful for my experiences and the way that I've been able to ultimately develop my relationship with spirit. All this reminiscing on my church days now got me wanting to listen to some Kirk Franklin and gospel music after I finish recording this, because the funny thing is that this Christian church that I grew up in, like I said, was all Latino, predominantly Dominican, and funny enough, our youth pastor was actually African American, but his wife was Dominican. So he was like fluent in Spanish. He was very familiar with their culture. Our church services were done in Spanish, but when we would break out to go meet with the youth or go to Sunday school, that was done in English. So it was just really interesting to be part of this Latinx congregation that had a lot of Black Latinx members, but then we had an actual African American youth pastor. So people are always surprised, for example, when I'm like, oh yeah, like I love Kirk Franklin, I love gospel music. They're like, how do you know this song? And I'm like, well, funny enough. Interesting. You see, I actually, had a Black youth pastor in my Latinx church. So yeah, but these are the things that make me me, and these are the things that make me beautiful. And I love this about me. I love being able to have these beautiful moments and experiences, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I have some of the best memories in church. I'm very grateful, and I love me a good Sunday service. I remember as a kid, like rating all the churches that we would go to, like in my head. So being like, oh, I really enjoy like the Christian church because like their Sunday services are always so exciting. Like they have a live band versus like the Catholic church. Like they only have a tambourine and it's not as exciting. Y'all, the Christian church just be having this. If they have a live band, the Sunday service is always going to hit. Okay. Anyways, see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you all and I love you so much. Thank you so much for joining us this week on Work Your Magic. Make sure to visit allthingsala.com where you can subscribe to the show, see all the dope ways I'm working my magic, and never miss an episode. While you're at it, if anything in this episode resonated with you, or if you find value in this show, I would greatly appreciate some love in the form of a rating on Apple Podcasts, a link text to your sister, prima, vecina, or business bestie, or a screenshot on social media. This energy exchange would mean so much to me as it helps this passion project continue to grow and reach more soul-led entrepreneurs like you. Also, if you enjoyed this show, you would greatly benefit from my group coaching program, Business Through the Chakras, where I help soul-led entrepreneurs boss up and authentically shine through business strategy and chakra healing. Check out the link in the description or go visit allthingsala.com.